back. You tuned into the South African Morning, and scrap the 1 metre social distancing rule. That's the plea from the Western Cape Education Department. The department says this rule has led to 80% of schools to use rotational attendance. And for more on this, I'm now joined by Provincial Department Spokesperson Bronagh Hammond. Many thanks for your time this morning, Bronagh. Just maybe furnish us with some of the details that have informed the call that you're making around the social distancing rule that currently exists in schools.
Well, when the call came in to have a full attendance of primary schools last year, we got the applications back from our primary schools, and approximately 88% of our primary schools indicated that they could not adhere to the 1 metre social distancing rule and therefore had to continue with rotation. So currently, we have only got 12% roughly of our primary schools that have got full-time attendance. And we simply cannot go on like this because we do know that it is affecting our education outcomes severely.
Now, I wanted you to maybe break that down for us in terms of the impact that this has had on education and learners, the disrupted sense of learning that we've had over the last 2 years, the impact that it's had, and whether those negative implications can be reversed.
Well, certainly that is our aim, is to reverse them, and we've got a recovery plan in place to do so. But we cannot, do that if we continue with this rotation system for another year. It will affect those plans, and we were really hopeful that 2022 would bring about a new era in terms of the pandemic and actually looking at our schools going back to full-time attendance. We definitely, some of our learners, for instance, are only attending school once or twice a week, and we are definitely seeing that the differences in the foundation phase specifically, where our learners are not getting that face-to-face time with the teacher. And what is happening at home, we do not know what is happening at home because we cannot monitor it. So while our schools are doing as much as possible to ensure that learners do have homework and at-home learning at home, we cannot monitor that at-home learning, and many of our learners are also left unattended. Then the other thing is the safety concerns in terms of those learners that are left unattended because their parents are naturally at work. And then also the school feeding scheme. Well, we provide meals to learners that are on the school feeding scheme, even if they are on rotation and are at home that day, they can collect their meals. But we are finding that those numbers are decreasing. It's just a natural thing that if you are at school, it's more convenient to fetch your meal, and therefore learners aren't fetching those meals as much as possible.
No, absolutely. I mean, the state of national disaster has been extended until February the 15th. So are you confident that your calls will be heard and it'll be heeded? What are you hearing from the National Department in terms of conversations around adjusting the way that schooling is done in the time of the pandemic?
I think we're on the same page as the Department of Basic Education. Our primary focus as the Education Department is to educate and to have teaching and learning taking place in our schools. That is our primary aim, and to provide quality education. So we're on the same page, and we do both know that the rotation of learners is obviously disrupting that. And therefore, I think that they are also doing their best to try and get the regulations changed, but they're in their own discussions with their health department as well as COCTA, and it is dependent not on DBE to change the regulations, but on COCTA the COCTA regulations to change. So until those regulations change, DBE can't make any moves further. So we know that we have a lot of support from the parent community. I get emails nearly every day from parents saying, please, can we get the system changed? We know that we have got other unions that have come out and support school governing body associations, education specialists. I think the whole education sector wants the full attendance. There's no doubt about it, but there are obviously concerns about the pandemic, and we need to take that into account. But for us as a province, the Provincial Health Department for the first time has actually said, we do agree that the 1 metre rule can be relaxed given the situation right now.
If it's not relaxed and you don't get the go-ahead from the relevant stakeholders, what would you say are some of the alternative measures that you could put in place to make sure that as many children are getting as much education in as possible?
Well, I think one of the superstars of the pandemic in our education department in the Western Cape is the curriculum development team and our e-learning team. They have been unbelievable in terms of when the pandemic hit in March 2020. They just hit the ground running. We have weekly lesson plans that are uploaded every single week that parents even can follow for their child in terms of which grade, which subject, which language. And as well as we've had teacher training for teachers in terms of blended learning approaches, how to do, e-learning at home, and also how to develop materials for possible learning at home. We've provided extra print budget to schools so that they can print materials so that learners can take home that print material if they do not have access to e-resources. So there's been a lot of things done, and we feel that we are coping, but we do know, and we've seen our senior phases coping more than our foundation phases. And I think that's where our big concern lies, is that the learners in our grades 1 to 3 to 4 and so forth are already struggling. We have something in the Western Cape called the systemic tests. We're the only province to conduct these testing in language and maths. And at the end of last year, we conducted this testing, and preliminary results indicate a massive drop in the language and mathematics cognitive skills of learners in grades 3 and 6. Those results will be out soon, but of course, it just goes to show that our younger learners need that face-to-face teaching time with their teachers.
Yeah, and of course, it's not just about the learners, Bronagh. The teachers probably also get quite frustrated when they are teaching children in a very different way. Children are not catching on to concepts in the same way. That frustration, and teachers having to deal with that, and of course, cancelling some of the rules and regulations would really assist in alleviating that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think these last 2 years have been extremely stressful on our educators. We've identified psychosocial support and wellness as one of our priority areas for 2022 because there's definitely been an effect. They are struggling to cope. It puts a lot of pressure on them. You've got a grade 4 class coming in on the Monday, and then the next day you're teaching that same lesson, but also trying to ensure that the learners at home have the additional material. It's almost doubling up their work. And then they still need to try and ensure that they keep up with the curriculum. So the pressure around that is extreme. So there's a lot of pressure on teachers. But this is not to say that there's also not pressure when we have full-time attendance, when we have, and this is the reality in the Western Cape, which we've been very open about. We have some schools with overcrowded classrooms, and that also puts pressure on teachers. So I think, it's a difficult environment all around for teachers. But at the end of the day, if a child is at home and is not getting that stimulation, is not getting that routine, and is not getting that day-to-day, stimulation, that it does drop off, and we are concerned about the drop-off rates in years to come. We are certainly concerned that the learners that are in our foundation phase and are not getting those basic language and mathematics skills, how will they develop in years to come? And if they're falling behind, their confidence, that's one of the major things. If you can't get those skills in the foundation phase, and as they grow up in the system, if they don't have that confidence, then ultimately could result in dropouts. So our aim is to ensure that we improve the retention rates of learners so that we give every opportunity to every child that enters a school in this province to finish their grade 12. So everything now is going against that whole aim and vision that we have for our learners.
Earlier on, Bronagh, you spoke about e-learning and the fantastic work that the team in the Western Cape has been doing in terms of providing materials to learners remotely. What have you found in terms of access? Are you finding that learners do have access to resources to be able to be exposed to the e-learning material that you have put in place for them while they are not in an actual classroom? What are you finding in terms of access?
Well, obviously there's those schools and learners that do have access where they can have a Zoom call with their teacher, as we are doing now. But there's obviously then those that have access to WhatsApp. And then how do we train our teachers to utilize different types of technology so that they can give that access to learners in different forms and formats, which is also easy accessible and, of course, in terms of data-free and so forth. So we have looked at ways and means of doing that and also training our teachers in how to do that. But so we have WhatsApp lessons, for example, that are happening. And then, of course, of those that do not have access at all, then we also provide a lot of, as I said, a budget for printing material. So we've provided millions of rands to schools in terms of printing extra resources just for that purpose.